वनक्कम, मैं हैदर अली सैयद आसिफगंज से यूनाइटेड अंडर तमिल
Haidar, when we were discussing on this Christianity, uh, I was wondering that why people don't speak about Christianity or Jesus Christ with without any prejudice, any pre-notion. Either they speak in terms of total belief as a Christian believer, they speak, or they speak in the way that, based on non-believing, as a non-believer, because as a non-believer does not mean that like you are against something, but people, when they say non-believer, their opinions are generally against something. When you don't believe in Islam, people tend to pass a command which is sound more of an against Islam, against Asiyogam, against Samanam, against Jainism. When we are not a believer or something, that without any other feeling, that my personal opinion, we're supposed to look at things the way it is, without any liking or disliking, and we need to say that I think about religion, I'm seeing it very, very less, or I actually may not have seen it all. So when we speak of biblical term, the audiences, the listeners could be either a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew. So all these three are somewhere connected with the ethnicity, Jewish ethnicity or like Hebrew ethnicity, or somewhere that the moment you, if anyone says something that immediately that it sounds very it is offensive for all three, or any one of them. When people that who doesn't belong to these three religions, and when they speak up, they make sure that they bash or their belief, or which can or offensive remarks they make. I always wonder, why is it people don't look at things the way it is, as a very simple human, or based on the information which is given, the understanding of that information, without any other affinity. So I always wonder, though I totally grew up in a Christian culture, or you could say, I totally grew up, and when I raise questions on the logical, which I call it logical questions, so people found it uneasy. I mean, since being come from a Christian family, that the people may not have said anything, but they found it uneasy. And in some of the question at a different point of time, they were looking at me as a Catholic family, since the person was speaking from a Baptist background. So he said, there is some devil, he said, like some name. He said, it is on my tongue. It is making me talk like that. So he believed that, a tongue is the one which do the talking. That's in the tongue something, but actually the speech is an expression of your thought process. It is not the tongue. In order to do the expression, tongue, the system of that the tongue that helps you out to produce sounds is very simple. But they tend to say that way for thousands of years. I mean, the last 2,000 years, I guess. So anyway, so the way I saw it is, I was wondering, why is that Yeshua was happened to be a rabbi? Because during his time, there are more than 1 million Jews were there in Jerusalem. And based on the accounts, I see that people, Parsis, Sadducees, they were all in a kind of in positions. They were holding a position, whereas each of them were part of administration in some way or the other. their opinions mattered. It's more like an elected members of two different segments of Judaism. Then I see that in a temple, in a Jerusalem temple, there was a chief priest. The chief priest is that somebody that who does not conduct sermons, the one like that who keep the temple administration going on. If anyone go up to him, a rabbi or anyone that go for a personal discussion, they do it. But the priest does not address people. Like I have never really heard any accounts that he called common people and he was addressing them based on Torah, the way that the priests are doing that in the churches. No. But the priest is in a high position, whereas all of them, be it Sadducees or Pharisees, that like, for administration purpose, they sit and discuss the community issues, the community benefits. They speak to the rulers or the governors, or they go up and like they speak, they make the request. It's more like a representative of the community, Jewish community, you can say. But where does the rabbi come? See, rabbis, which I have noticed, the way things are, uh, whenever somebody that have gone through the Torah, they, be it John the Baptist or him, Yeshua, or even probably like many others, there are random information is there about other rabbi, and they go and speak on a specific subject. The way that a clubhouse rooms are being conducted, people come up with the title and they speak on it, and whoever comes, they ask questions and they give explanations, like for their understanding. I'm sure that the way that trolls are being seen in clubhouse wouldn't have been there. It's all Jewish people who are not a rabbi, which means who has not studied Torah, but they want to follow Torah, the basic instruction. And basic instruction is generally, I think, being taught in all Jewish families. But understanding of the instruction, understanding of certain morality, that when people ask extra questions, who wants to know more, they go to the rabbi and ask their doubts and ask questions. So they explain to them. So that means the people who read the Torah are a handful. And Torah is in Hebrew and people were speaking in Aramaic. So the rabbi has to be well versed with both Hebrew as well as Aramaic, so that for all the questions regarding Torah, that he can speak to people in Aramaic. Looks more like that is a kind of a luxury which is not which everyone did not get. Hardly a handful of people. So let's look at what is the position Yeshua had, so that he can study about Torah. Because there is one account says that when he was 9 years old, he go up to the temple and he talked to the elders of the community and asking questions, and probably the abnormal or unique questions to them, and they were surprised about the kind of a question, a logical question probably, that then they explained to him that is being accounted. So how does it is? What we understand based on the Gospels is Mary, Yeshua's mother, she was, in some of the Jewish accounts, I think, or not Jewish account, in Christian accounts, it says that she was serving for the temple, I think that it's more like a community service. It is not nobody were employed, and so from the community, a section of people that come serve in the temple. And Joseph, Yeshua's father, Joseph was someone who was in contact with the chief priest all the time. Though they are from Samaria, they have come to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem that they were in contact with the church, with the temple, because even their wedding, even the uh, when Mother Mary that she conceived Yeshua, it is all like the incident like all happened like within the church. Church had a very strong, the temple had a very strong connection in their life, and in their life, and it has been accounted that Joseph was a carpenter, and he had about another 5, 6 sons. It's a kind of a normal family, maybe then now it's a big family. So in that family, that Joseph was able to provide everyone everything. Is why he was able to allow his son to study Torah, because it requires, it's a new language. It is the Hebrew is not a spoken language then, and it was more of it was Aramaic, which was a spoken language. So allowing a son, instead of working for a living, allowing a son, which means that they were basically that above average. Father was able to provide all his sons, and one son can can learn new language and even Torah. That requires dedication. So, with another thing they require is, besides the common economical wealth, they also needed to have an easy connection with the church, with the temple, temple priest and everyone, whereas they can ask someone to teach Yeshua Torah based on his inquisitive knowledge, inquisitive mind, and they would be interested in teaching him. That is also there, right? And that is another way that I also saw that it is understood in my way that it is not everybody who were going to the temple. The reason is all the time they go there on special occasion, because every time someone go to the temple, it costs them money. According to the economic status, during the period of Romans, when governors were established, and I don't think that besides one section, most part of the Jewish community were struggling to live a life. So because they need to pay kind of money to those priests and everyone. There is a lot of rituals are there. For every now and then you go that they'll have to pay money there. All that is there. So that kind of a criticism also, it has happened in different other books about the temple and the priest, right? So how they accumulate wealth. So that is also mentioned. So either they got to be that above average, if not, they had some sort of a close connections and with the church, with the temple, so they were able to. They have the easy access to those that who teach Torah to people. So that's how we must have learned. And there is one more thing it is being said. After that, in the gospel, that there is no mention of him, and then he appears one day when he was 32 years old. So the speculation is being done by varieties of people these days. One is he has come to Kashmir. Another one is general statement that he has come to India, because these are all modern terms. These ideas were conceived during the modern terms when the term India exists, but during the period of Jesus Christ, that India did not exist. If they had mentioned Sind, Sindhu Desam, which is mentioned in Esther. In Old Testament, that is Esther, that is about 600 years before Christ. During that time, I think right after Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, I think. So, so during that time, if it was, if they had mentioned, Sindhu Desam, the Sindhu Desam, because what happened was in 18th century, there was one specific Catholic priest, I guess. So what he did is that when he did the translation, what is mentioned in that book is Sindhu Desam, that he made it to Hindu Desam. He is the one who did the job. And I think he's a German translator. So when that you can see it in Tamil books, then like in English translation, they started putting India, or I don't know, Hindu Desam. They might have mentioned, but originally it was mentioned that Sindhu Desam. Sindhu Desam, the reference in Esther, that it actually talking about the Scythians, the region of Scythians, which is part of Assyria, Afghanistan, and to today's Delhi and that part. It was known as Greek Bacto kingdoms, or it can't be called as a kingdom to my understanding. It's supposed to be cities, because in those days they were actually creating cities rather than kingdoms. They create a city, then to a specific radius, they will say it is their land. And slowly, gradually, that settlements were made. That is how nomadic settlements were made. That is how nomadic kingdoms were established. But that is not the same case for all civilized ethnic culture like us. For us or Africans, that is not the case, because some people were living here for thousands and thousands of years. So there was always like even the cities and towns and kingdoms were established from the ancient time. Only the borders were changing time to time. So that particular mention. So if these people say that Jesus Christ had come to Sindhu Desam, in that region there was only one city which was a very popular and a prosperous trade city, which is Kandahar, which is in today's Afghanistan. So there is a possibility that the ships which were coming from these ports and any other Levant region, like the ports were there, like from there to a lot of ships were coming to the Karakoram region, and the sea routes were kind of it actually it does not come through the Africa, it passed through East Africa. That is how they were traveling. That was the most easiest ways and safest way. So that was the way that you can read Periplus of Erythraean Sea, that like the sea routes were defined in such way. So because why I say that particular part is, if you read the Gospel of Thomas, that one account is being said about his Gospel of St. Thomas's voyage. So he come from that region, because these all were Roman ports in those days, like from one Roman port to another Roman port, like near Karakoram, and then travel by land. That is one easy route. Another route they had was the easiest route, the regular route is Mussoorie of today's Kerala, which is another Pandyan port, which is about 300 kilometers from Madurai. That is one of the ports like Pandyan used. All the ports belong to the Pandyan. The neighboring regions were ruled by chieftains and feudal lords, but the ports were in control of Pandyas. Without Pandyan, the taxes were collected by Pandyas, especially the ports and tolls. So that's how it was. So if he had come, he should have either come to Karakoram. If not, like he should have come to Mussoorie, which was the trade ships were pretty common that for to and fro. to these regions. Right? It's a lot. By the time that it all became that Roman trade routes, because by the time that like Roman took over everything, and it was Romans, and so according to some references, till 13th century, Romans and Pandyas had some sort of an ally. So it's more like the permissions were granted. However, so the next one is that these are the possibility. And if we look into why they had to say, instead of saying Jesus went to Greece, Jesus went to Europe, instead of all that, why do they say that like in India? There's got to be some reason that to connect Yeshua to India, right? Because in most of his speech, the methodology of speech, and even the contents, the concept behind it, behind everything he said, has a very close association of Asivagam actually, which I believe, what are the Asivagam principles? Because one thing that either that you speak on Asivagam Pandya history, but not on Asivagam principle, because I speak on that. I do understand what it is. Because though today the different names, in our everyday life, the principles are part of it. The understanding, our actions based on the principles, it is more like everyday life. And that reflection, you can see it in any of the Tamil literature. For example, Thirukkural. Thirukkural, in many of the verses that it actually connect to, it is kind of similar to Christ's, Yeshua's teaching. It's very easy. So that's why Yeshua's teaching that when it is being in Tamil Nadu, it is quite easy for the people to understand, because all of them, they already know Thirukkural. Even if they don't know that, on a daily basis, when they go to school, they will understand. So probably that like these, another one is, they also people say that like how his speeches were similar to Buddha's, especially speaking in parables and all that. It's based on the Pali script. The way that Buddha had a discussion with people, it is all would be the same. But that is the Western point of view. But in my point of view, being the son of this land, and who know that how our Asivagam gurus were teaching, Buddha is another person that one of the another billion people existed before him and even after him. That is how our teachings were conducted. It's just that Buddhist people made a record of it in Pali, and then later they translated it into Sanskrit. So they have their own thing. When they translated into Sanskrit in later years, they started using slogas and all that. Is more like a chanting mantras, which never existed in Pali. They did all that. So that's how things happen. So the philosophical reflection, the philosophical similarity could have happened. Because of the similarity is why there are people come up with theories that he was in this region. That these are my general view about whatever it is being spoken regarding Yeshua. So, based on the family status, based on that thing, he was able to read, and that is about Yeshua and his family. Then, if you look at that, the disciples, who are the disciples? Like, who were with him? What are their status? If you look at it, there were tax collectors, there were fishermen, and some of them, most of them were his neighborhood. One or two, I think that they are different people, but who know him. And especially his own brother, I think, one of the person. One brother in the family. Joseph's son must be. But they all were doing when the fishermen, they were fishermen and tax collectors. The only person who is considered as a Mason is St. Thomas. That is in later books. It is not in their book, I think, that in later books. he's being recognized as Mason. But what was their social status then? Was it according to the social standard of that time? They were highly respected, wealthy, because obviously, if it is wealthy, respect comes eventually. So that can come. Was that their status? If you look at it, no, because there was a criticism about Ishwa, that with what kind of a people that he is hanging around. They were criticizing him as people that who are not proper, the low standard according to the whatever the norms they had. That because the tax collector or somebody that generally in any country, in any ethnicity, from today to even that day, that always being not being liked, especially if someone is a tax collector for an oppressor, not his own king, even for his own king. And if there is a tax collector, like they don't blame the king, they blame the tax collector because of his, probably that work requires rudeness. I don't know how they did it, but that's a general opinion, which normally that are being recorded in historical events. And they talk about tax collector, like that's what they say. They treat them more like a robber, because there is a whole community in Tamil Nadu. They are being openly being considered as robbers, but their previous work was they were actually tax collectors. Yeah. So generally people just didn't like. And fishermen, and that you can see that from ancient times, from our ethnic to any ethnic, people love fish. They enjoy the food, but they never like the person. Based on uh, cleanliness, they'll have plenty of reason. They because if a human mind is such a mind that if they want to hate somebody, if they want to dislike something, or if they want to project that they are better, they need to dislike somebody. They need to degrade somebody. So they will find 101 reasons, especially for the fishermen, which I know it on a day, even to these days. I see that how these fishermen or men are being treated in my region. And I have seen how fishermen's sons were treated in classes when we studied in school. We lived in a world that everybody sit together to study all kinds of people. Today the world has changed, but in those days that we sit, I have watched that how they treat each other. The young boys, for no reason, they will humiliate the person. I have watched that because that's where my logical mind worked. But anyway, I used to wonder what's wrong with this guy, because the moment you apply logic, that's the thing comes. So that is the way that the people must have looked at those fishermen, and all of those people that for some reason they didn't want to continue the job what they did. So when Jesus called, when Yeshua called, they simply followed him. They could be thinkers. They were looking for something instead of doing something routine. So definitely, those people were not ordinary people that who live with their own problems on a daily basis, or totally programmed to live with their problems, live with whatever it is, accept what is being given to them. There are people who does not. They wonder that how they can break it. At one point of time, that when that opportunity comes, people take it up. So that's the way I see. So they were. See, there is one problem we see in Clubhouse. Listening is the biggest problem. It's the very biggest problem. It's very hard, especially that when someone talks that we have to go and tell them that he is wrong. And that too, when the moment you walk into the room, within 2 minutes we have to tell him. At that time we would be speaking for hours. We can't spend like another half an hour or 1 hour to see that anything. What is he talking about? And where why it is wrong, that what is right. If somebody is wrong, we also have to say that that is not how it is, and they have to explain that in which way that should have been, the view should have been. Or it is not necessary we have to say somebody is wrong, because everybody's got a view. Just because we have one view does not mean that other person's view is wrong. They can of course have their happy view, we can have our views, we can of course listen to them. Just because they are somebody is different, somebody has a different view, does not mean that we should not listen to them. We can always think that why is it different people believe this is fact? Because we don't know. We might even come to know that we might even understand them. Just because we understand them, it is not necessary we have to follow them. We can of course follow, understand them and say, oh, okay, this is a reason they believe in this, okay, good. But I choose to believe in the other way. I can always go that way because I do that, right? Because I'm not a person that who can be conditioned by institutional theology. I cannot. It is not practically possible. If I'm part of an institution, that's a problem for the institution, which I've seen in the past. So it does not work. So this mind doesn't stop asking questions. So I live this way, and that does not mean that the institutional theology is wrong. It is not suitable for me. But it is there are many people they require based on their way they live their life, and they can of course continue. But don't push anything onto people. That's the way I go. So where do we go from here? Yeah. So in this way, that what I see is, and they were asking some question, which the moment they met or they saw Yeshua, he said, "Follow me." That they followed, dropping everything in their livelihood. With imagine their status that they just dropped their income by following this man. They won't even know that whether they'll have food or not, but with the belief that this man will take care of me. So they just simply followed. So these type of a people, this type of a person, the social environment Yeshua was, in my understanding, and his disciple were in such social status, and they were probably based on the my understanding, the similar people. So, but at the same time, we have to give it to them. They were some sort of thinkers. That's why they happen to follow. And listening is another thing. They were listening to him all the time, and they also there are some very valid questions were raised. Some of the questions, because based on the question is how a speaker can actually speak. So they did ask a question to Yeshua in such a way that he was able to speak more and more, and they were being sincere in what they do, and that's the way I understand Yeshua and 12 disciples. Number could have been more. Actually, when they were organized, the kind of a leadership needed, and 12 were kind of chosen. Because at one point of time, before he was crucified, that as per the accounts, everybody were the followers. Each of them were doing some work. Each of them had some sort of a responsibility. After he was crucified and resurrected, based on the gospel, and when they needed some sort of an how his questions were done. And you can say that picture will still be what I expect. Keep faith. Most importantly, only then he becomes a rabbi. But in today's standard, it is not easy to become a rabbi. You need institutionalized rabbiism, you can call it. So the things are different today. But the things of Yeshua's time is different then. So from here that so it's a description of the team the way I have understood. In case if any one of you have a question or anything to say, please. I will give it a moment. I take the moment for
Thank you.